So hello everybody and welcome to our first Curiosity of the year. Prof Ben unfortunately couldn't make the session today. He's on a flight, in mid-flight at the moment. He was supposed to be flying back. So we're going to start our debate as always with something that we've been grappling with quite a bit at Vinci at the moment, and that is about universities of the future. So one of the things is around, we've been discussing, so what is the actual purpose of a university? And I would really love all your opinions on what you think of the purpose of a university. If you think back to academia, hundreds of years ago, and some of the founding fathers of many of the theories, they sat in these convocations, had these discussions, had all these bright ideas, and then they were sort of bled into the world. And we've come up to this concept of universities being quite formalized structures, and a lot of, the environment being, are we really training entrepreneurs? Are we really training people to have the skills that are needed? I read something interesting, that's why I had my phone today, and it's what sparked my thoughts about this. And it was just sort of like a little blurb on, it was a tweet actually, and it said, future universities, it was by La Trobe University, and it says, future universities will be places where university and industry are co-located and collaborate on projects that solve real-world problems. They'll become precincts of innovation that actively apply research for community impact. Now, I know that that's what we are trying to achieve at Da Vinci, but I know we don't always get it right. And I also know that many universities that I've been part of have not done anything like that. So I guess the debate I'd like to throw out there is, what is the purpose of a university, number one? And then number two, how do you foresee a university in 20 years' time? What should they be doing to gear students to be able to take on the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th industrial revolutions that are to come in our world? And sorry, I didn't introduce those of you, I see quite a few new faces, those of you that have never been to a Curiosity before. The reason for this seating is because of the whole Da Vinci notion that we should be engaging our shadow. So it is very awkward that we will have people to our back and to our front, but it's that concept that you always have a shadow in front and behind you, so you should always measure between your light and your dark and all those dichotomies that we have. But it is sometimes difficult to hear, so if you guys are struggling to hear or anything, please just feel free to interrupt. And the other idea of it is that we keep it small so that we can have conversations and have debates and have discussions. So I don't know if anyone wants to...
So in as much as our forefathers and these academics who conceptualized the idea of a university where the universal truth is exposed through research, through collaboration, through consultation, etc., the notion will have to change in terms of this brick and mortar structure where academics, researchers, scholars gathered to do their business. Now, if we move into the future, very little is by way of physical contact in the current world. So I think this is one of the things that we're going to start thinking about, is in as much as we may begin to open ourselves and interact with business and industry, but the space is going to be very much a mediated space, I think.
And I think one of the things, Prof, that you've raised there is also around the fact that if any of you have lectured recently, you will know that students in classrooms and in universities sit and Google the things that you used to actually be really smart about, and they then continue to debate and argue and whatever. So, and it doesn't mean that people don't necessarily need guidance, etc. But that's what fascinates me. How are we going to gear universities with that amount of technological, advancement, etc. in those environments? I saw you wanted to comment earlier.
Due to, like they say, experience. How do you get experience when you just graduated? So that's another thing we need to also try and...
So ensuring that co-location between industry partnerships and where we're going is also in alignment, so that we make sure that students get enough real world experience solving real problems that could gear them towards that.
I think we need to go back to the high school system, because high school is, I can't even say anything, well, it's about 30% to pass now. Like, what does a person who has 30% knowledge even know about the world?
But I think it's maybe even beyond that, and that is about the way that people are taught. So that concept of rote learning, that in an outcome-based education environment, you often just have to know how to learn something off by heart and regurgitate the facts. So what is it that we get to the level where we're actually getting people to engage at a deeper level, and in that type of an environment as well? So, besides the pass rate that people focus on a lot, for me it's about the teaching and learning that actually takes place within those environments. That's something that I always wonder about.
A realization looking at what we produce as like graduates into the actual immediate world that we come from. Because like within a particular region or a country, we obviously have like situations where other, maybe a sector of maybe an engineering sector would be a lot more in need of such graduates, as opposed to maybe producing more people that are just going to actually add into a mix of pool of people that are just going to be graduates, because there's no real need for such people within that actual environment.
And what do you do in that case with evolution of environment? So if you decide that currently in a country, if I understand what you're saying, it's almost like to gear students for what's needed in that region or country. And what if that need goes away? Like if you look in South Africa, there was so much focus on, say, mining, and now look at the shift in those spaces. What do we do to ensure that flexibility and that movement and that agility remains? If we gear it towards X, how do we shift gears and make sure that we're actually engaging? Or if somebody goes into an industry, like I'm a trained journalist, communication practitioner, and I've spent the last 17 years in education, not in my field. So that's why I'm saying, how do we ensure that the qualifications or the training that people get is aligned with that type of a need?
Yeah, I think it's always going to be a question of having to just invest in knowing where we're gearing as a world, and also knowing what your neighbors are also doing as well. Because you can always learn from each other, and always be in a position of understanding where this actual world is actually gearing into.
Okay, yeah.
The issue of job creation versus value creation.
Yes.
It's important to try to find a balance. I know it's a very difficult balance to add, because over the years, historically, we've been talking about job creation, like I would like to graduate for a job.
Mm-hmm.
But for a job to be created, someone must add value first.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Someone must add value to a certain commodity, whatever it is, add value, that value to create jobs. Maybe the varsities very university need to be positioned in that space whereby the focus is more on value creation. What value can we add to so that employment could just a very child of that, not the opposite.
I'd be interested to hear from some of our research colleagues, as the executive deans with us and the vice principal, around how research can play a role as well. I'm saying in terms of business problems. So action research, those type of things.
In fact, I want to go back one step to say, you asked the question of the university and their relevance, I think.
Yeah, the purpose of a university now, will it still be the same? Is it still purposeful?
And of course, as Paul said that, in terms of in the 1860s and whatever, when the universities were formed, they were formed with a certain purpose, but that has moved. So the question is, do we still need universities? Because learning is virtual at the moment. Everything virtual, beyond the bricks and mortar. Knowledge is accessible. Do we need the universities, or do we need to rethink education? Maybe that's the question. And if people say, yes, we need universities, so what will the form and structure look like going forward?
Does anyone else?
I think we have also moved beyond trying to discover universal truths, because, well, especially from a postmodern perspective, truth is relative. and truth shifts.
It shifts.
And what we see as the truth today may not be the truth tomorrow. And also in terms of training people, do we really want to train people to become employees, or do we want to create employers? And do we want to teach people recipes, or do we want to teach people how to think, how to solve problems, how to approach problems, how to think outside the box, how to stretch their minds? And I think if that is what we can do as universities, then we will stay relevant. But if we don't shift and if we don't change, we are going to become irrelevant. Research, I think, will always have a place, and I think that will always be important because that's how we discover new things. But in a fast-paced world, I'm wondering if doing a PhD over 4 or 5 years, by the time you're done, everything you've done your research on is no longer relevant. So there also needs to be a shift in the way we do things and approach things.
And I think Lebogang, our esteemed speaker today, you'll tell us from an entrepreneurial perspective how many entrepreneurs fail as well, but also about how few of the skills learned are actually learned skills at an institution of higher learning, and many of them are life skills that are learned along the way. And how do we incorporate that into our university structures? Because that's something I've always been fascinated by. People say that they do qualifications in entrepreneurship, and I always wonder, what do they teach? And I do. And I have attended some of the MOOCs and things like that. Participated, not attended, sorry. And I just still don't get it, because you still learn the basics of business and the this of that. It's not that kind of real hardcore, that 7% of entrepreneurs only succeed, and it's not that side of it, I don't think.
I related to my own personal experience. So I didn't go to university. Fresh out of high school, I started my first business. But along the years, I've hired people that are academics. And one of the problems that I've always had was essentially around problem solving. Whichever way it was, it's always around problem solving, because you can tell that marketing says the 4 P's of marketing. Shut. This is the problem. How do we solve the problem? The theory, I understand the theory part. And I was mentored. In marketing, I was mentored. In entrepreneurship, I was mentored now in technology. And funny thing is, sometimes when I meet with people, from now we launched a smartphone, I was sitting down with certain engineers the other day, and I'm always told that in engineering principles, this is impossible. I'm like, okay, cool, but we're solving problems. If our mandate, from an innovation perspective, is to solve problems, then how do we then say something is impossible? So, because if there's a problem, that means the solution is there. There's a quotation that I like that says there's nothing new under the sun. So if there's a problem, there is a solution somewhere. It's just an application. And I also think the problem sometimes, going back to what you said, when you train someone in a certain field, when you're only exposed to one field, what happens is that you only see that thing.
Yes.
And you are unable to see other things. What I've learned in entrepreneurship is that I could read 5 different books around strategy. One person will focus on management, another one will focus from a financial strategy perspective, another person will focus on people, like Simon Sinek or something like that. But now when I have a strategic problem, I have 5 ways of looking at that problem versus having one way of looking at it. So I've seen that most of the people that I've hired before, I've always had issues there with the problem solving. There's limited ways of applying problem solving to a certain problem, and it comes back to you to say, no, if I'm employing people, then there has to be value creation. But if you can't solve the problem, then I must solve it. Then what is the point of this person being?
Which is, I think, what you were speaking to earlier about value creation, etc., around your point. Sorry, I saw you, Jan, behind.
The congruence between the industry and university and the relevance of the university.
Yeah.
I think the university is very much relevant, will even become more relevant for the simple reason that industry is about practice, right? And of course, university does a lot of theory, but theory informs the practice. It's very important because you could have a very good practice that's not informed by theory. And it becomes limited that way. I'll just give you an example. So I'm a software engineer who lived most of my life in Canada. And I've seen when the computer revolution started, and there were a lot of people, like small kids, who learned how to program,
Yeah.
right? And so they could write these amazing programs. But then I saw a difference between somebody who has an engineering degree from the university vis-a-vis somebody who's self-taught.
Yes.
The one who's self-taught has a lot of practice, but that practice does not have a theory behind it. So the problem comes when it comes to things like algorithms, you see. So in algorithms requires that rigorous methods of problem solving. You know, things like the metaphysics of how you solve, the axiology of resolution and stuff like that. So I think and in fact that those people, they eventually, some of them go back to university to take more advanced software engineering courses, and they become better problem solvers. So I think in terms of, you use a very good word, co-location. It's a very good word. Yeah. Because co-location means that we have a particular place, it doesn't matter who owns it. It might be owned by the industry or the university.
Yeah.
But both of them have a vested interest in that place.
Yes.
So thank you.
But the vested interest, I think, is very important, and that is the relationship between industry and the university environments. And I think too often it's in isolation. I know Janet wants to say something, and then I'll come back to you.
I studied a BSc nursing degree many years ago, and I actually think that the broader university community could learn an awful lot from the way that nursing is taught. Because from literally the first month that you are in the university, you're also in the hospital. And all the way through your studies, you are working in the hospital with real life patients, sticking needles in them and doing whatever else you're going to do. And at the same time, you're learning the theoretical principles that undergird everything that you're doing. Medicine does a similar thing, but they actually only put them into the hospital from fifth year, generally speaking. And for me, it was a phenomenal way of learning. And Marla, I think back to your point around, you now become a specialist, but actually no. You learn about life, you learn life skills, you learn to interact with people, you learn how to deal with a boss. You learn all of those kind of things literally from day one. So I think that there's a lot to be said from that, for that style of partnership. It wouldn't look the same, I don't think, as it would 30 years ago. But I mean, we used to do problem-solving exercises at university based on cases we were seeing in the ward, etc., etc. The other piece I think that is going to be relevant, particularly relating to what Prof said just now, is that somehow it's going to have to become a lot more modular. Because at the moment it's kind of, you're committed to 4 years, this is the course of study. Whereas in the workplace, we're all learning things, we're online, we're studying things. So the whole notion of blending the kind of approach to RPL, and for RPL almost to become mainstream, I think is going to become huge.
Okay.
But going back to the future university, and I think it's quite interesting that today in South Africa we're talking about the future university, where in some countries, to a certain extent, they've actually encouraged it. For example, if you look at Singapore, they've actually linked education up until to the person that works, or the need of the economy. I think the challenge in South Africa is that we are in silos, or we work in terms of structure. So, for example, there's lower education, higher education, postgraduate, all those, and none of those things are linked. And therefore, you find, for example, graduates that are sitting without work. But what has happened is that if we take an analogy to say, let's use a company, we say that varsities are part of a company. For example, you had a responsibility, if you had marketing, finance, and all that, and varsity becoming part of the people that sit on the board of a country or global economy. So anything that gets strategized in terms of what the economy needs, varsities will be first people that will actually know what they need to deliver in terms of education, so that anything that comes through the value chain is actually quite necessary. So that you don't have the situation where people study for something and you find it's defunct, or it's not valid, or doesn't add value to them. The second point is that you made a very good point in terms of our universities are still needed. I think they should do, but what university, any higher education has failed to do has been innovative. For example, if we look at in anything that we do in the economy at the moment, we're still acting like the industrial era, where everything is based on pieces of work, where today, and an example to say that if you go into a work environment, someone comes in with theory that I've learned from a university perspective, but from a practical perspective, that thing doesn't work anymore. So, I mean, I've had an experience being a student working in corporate for more than 25 years, and now I'm an entrepreneur. And when I look at, for example, interacting with people that have even higher education than I have, and I look at the divide between what can they actually do. They might be great in terms of what they're doing, but practically they can't do that. So I think the answer to university is that we should stop, and I'm including myself as part of the university, we should stop acting in silos, and understand that we need to have to go back and have that relationship with the environment, business, the economy, the politics of the world, and don't divide ourselves from it. So that when you go back and you teach, even at PhD level, if you go and teach someone, you already have a mandate from a government, a economy, where they're going to say that this is actually going to add value. But the need for universities are definitely there. And my last point, if you go back to the history of universities, you go to the Greek eras and the Roman eras, those guys, they were taught to add value to the economy. So someone would be taught to say, this country wants to go to that level, so you're going to be a specialist in that environment. So when that thing comes in, you already have the knowledge and all those type of things that you can add back into the economy. I think that's the way universities need to think.
So I think that's an incredible point, and it also linked back similarly to what you were saying. So the idea of this, guys, is there's no solution. It's just we throw topics out and we like to have the ideas. But what I'd really like to also encourage you guys, because this is obviously the smaller community and we impact a larger community. So in Tukuza, for example, one of our esteemed council members, I see something on his LinkedIn profile and I want to share it and those type of things. I would really appreciate it if you guys come across anything that is helpful, that you either email, say, communications@Vinci, or otherwise you inbox us on Facebook or somewhere like that, so that we can actually start sharing some of these ideas out there. Because I think what's really important is we come across nuggets of information, but we don't always share it. Because I'd actually like it if you guys write blogs and those things, that we can start sharing it. Because I think people are scared to write longer pieces like PhDs and masters, whatever, as we'll see with our next brave speaker. But the reality around it is that often you just have a short something to say. And I would really like to start sharing and engagement within the community so that we can actually start these debates that are purposeful and meaningful to people. Like even the point you just made, even if you just jot that down, and that's really awesome. So I'm going to leave it there for now.
You can also throw in topics if they'd like us
to
start conversations.
So we started, I set up a website called, an email address, communications@davinci.ac.za, that we can, if there's any ideas you'd like debated or anything around that. But I'm also fine if you inbox on Facebook and those kind of things, because I can also pick it up there. And we move forward with these kind of debates, because you've got so much to contribute. And often, like you shared something this week about some of the skills. And I thought it was really awesome, because it was critical thinking, problem solving, all the skills everyone's raising, and those were listed as like the top 10 skills, etc. So that kind of stuff's really nice as well to sort of share. So the next part of this, and as I say, it sometimes feels like we've left it a bit hanging, but we can come back to these topics again as well, and that's something that we can keep debating.